Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Keri Bloomfield joining us. Hi Keri.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
And some of you might remember we've had Keri before as author for the day, so I'm glad to be interviewing her. A little bit about Keri. Keri's a Kiwi mum in Denmark and author of Nothing Like a Dame, which is a humorous and heartfelt insight into creating a new life in a faraway land. A witty observer of cultural nonsense. Keri moved from New Zealand to Denmark with her Danish partner and daughter in 2016. In her first year, she created the bilingual Backpack Baby blog, sharing her adventures and learning as she began finding her way in Denmark. She is a connector, a communicator, and in addition to writing, freelances as a community manager. So thanks for joining us, Keri. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a bit about Nothing Like a Dane.
Yeah, sure. This is it here. It's my story, I guess, of moving to Denmark and what happens when you talk to a stranger in the pub in Wellington in your hometown, and that stranger turns out to be a Danish tourist. And that's how I met my Danish partner, and we moved to Denmark in 2016 with a 4-month-old baby. And if you've moved to another country before and tried to build your life in another country, you'll know it's not easy. And I would say those first couple of years were dark in places, as I tried to work out how the new country worked, got my head around the language, find friends, find job, find where the milk is in the supermarket, the big and the small things. So the book follows those first couple of years. My writing style is in the main lighthearted. And I share the challenges that I come across in those first couple of years from my viewpoint through my New Zealand lens as well, because we all experience countries differently. But it's a story of what it's like to become a foreigner, which is something that I think as locals, we maybe don't always have that insight, what it's like to move countries.
And I have to say that I've been reading your book on Kindle, probably only about halfway through, but really enjoying it. I can sort of relate, even though I moved from New Zealand to Australia, not quite a big cultural difference, but still a lot of differences. Like you said, getting
So
to know
different.
how the country works and things like that. Same language, luckily, so I didn't have to learn a new language. But also,
Mm.
I have some family in Denmark as well, and some of the things you said, like the flags and some and the bikes and that, some of them like I was
Mm.
already aware of. So was really enjoyed reading what I've read so far and getting a little bit
Nice.
more of a further insight.
Nice. Must be filling in the little pieces for you, understanding,
Yeah,
yeah, why they have the flag everywhere. The flag is such
yeah.
a big thing here. It's
Mm,
a sign of celebration. So it can be to celebrate birthdays or Christmas,
mm,
or anniversaries. So,
mm.
yeah, I should have also mentioned throughout the book, as you would have seen, I've put in about 60 side notes or 60 insights, which kind of explains a little bit more how the country works and why it works. Um, yeah, to give it a bit of a factual meaning as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just wondering if you want to share without any spoilers or anything, but maybe something that surprised you the most or shocked
Yeah,
you or maybe even shocked you the most.
yeah, it's well, I think the opening scene, which you would have come across, is the swimming pool scene and I
Mm,
guess the overall attitude towards nudity in Denmark and
mm,
I think most of Scandinavia. I've been brought up in New Zealand where uh, I don't know if we're not taught to be ashamed of our bodies, but certainly when
mm,
you go to the swimming pool, you master the art of changing underneath a big towel pretty
mm,
quickly. Whereas coming into a Danish swimming pool scene, it's very different. The changing rooms are pretty much like a one-way maze. You come in one end, you take off your shoes immediately, you find a locker, you take off all your clothes, you walk towards the showers, which will be at the furthest end. wash completely, and then put on your togs or swimming suits, togs as we call them in New Zealand, and then head back out. But it's this very sort of casual approach to nudity, which in some ways is wonderful, because you're taught not to be ashamed of your body. Everyone's got a body. They're all different. One's not better than the other, and who cares at the end of the day? So, you know, that follows through to now. My daughter is now 7 years old, and at the schools here, when they have, well, we would call it physical education, when they have a sports class, the children right from the age of 7 are showering with their classmates at the end of that. And yeah, I know when I went to school, we weren't doing that, which also sounds, I mean, it sounds disgusting. We were doing exercise and not washing. So it's not that one way is right or wrong. There's many ways to do the same thing. But I find myself now, trying to explain to people how things work in Denmark and why they wouldn't work in New Zealand as well. But that becomes an interesting, the next conversation that comes on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still struggle with the nudity.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you become more comfortable with it as time's gone on? And one thing I remember as well that I found really interesting was when they asked you what you say when you finish your meal.
Yes. Yeah. That is, so when you have a meal in Denmark, it's very common, if not compulsory, at the end of the meal for people to say tak for mad, which means thanks for the food. And it's almost drilled in to everybody. So, you know, here every weeknight at home, that's how we end the meal. Whoever didn't cook it, we're saying tak for mad to the person that did cook it. And you know, we you know, I thought we did the same thing in New Zealand, but really we don't in the way that it is carried out here in Denmark. It is very much a chant that the meal is finished with, which again is super lovely. But if you haven't come across it before, you run the risk of being the awkward foreigner at the table, just getting up and, you know, starting to do the dishes because that's your way of thinking, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's these small things.
Yeah. And what have you found is the hardest thing to explain from New Zealand to a Danish person?
That our babies don't sleep outside.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. So that still happens now?
It's very commonplace at the daycare centres. So with childcare in Denmark, most children are in childcare from 1 year old. And the reason for that is childcare is heavily subsidised. Also, university education is as well. So you have a population that's received a university education, most of them, or if not university, they have been trained. And so it's part of enabling them and supporting the parents to be able to get back to work is to subsidise childcare. So most of the children in childcare from around 10 months, and at the childcares, the children are taking their naps outside in permanent prams that are parked outside. That is still the normal for children to take their naps there. And again, it's not that children don't sleep outside in New Zealand or other parts of the world, but it's not their designated bed. They might fall asleep on a walk and you might leave them out on the porch. But here it's very much part of the culture and how you raise children.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like you said, leaving them outside in public places and not being worried that someone's going to steal your baby.
Yeah, there's a joke, somebody saying, why would I steal a baby? Imagine all the nappies I'd have to change. I mean, crikey. So, but I think when I first moved here, I didn't realise that the prams actually have a baby monitor in them. So the parents will put a little monitor in and they can hear when the baby wakes. They run this wonderful session at the movie theatres here called baby sessions, and you can park your baby outside the movie theatre in the pram, and the staff will kind of keep an eye on them, and then the mums can go in and watch the movie. You can also take the babies in as well. But it's But, you know, I moved here when our daughter was 4 months old, and I was still myself learning to be a mother, albeit the New Zealand way. And then 4 months into that, that got turned upside again. And you want to blend in so you don't draw attention to yourself, but also you don't know what you don't know. And for me, baby sleeping outside wasn't something that I felt my daughter needed to do. I knew there was a whole world out there that wasn't doing that, and, you know, raising healthy babies all the same. So our daughter actually didn't sleep outside at home, but when she was at daycare, she took her nap outside just like all the other children.
Yeah. And can you tell us what made you want to write this book? And yeah, maybe how did you go about getting it published?
Yeah. So after being in Denmark for a couple of years, well, not long after I moved here, actually, I started writing the Bilingual Backpack Baby blog. And I think a lot of people, when they're writing blogs, it came from a place of me giving a bit more purpose to my life, being able to share my story with, at first, family and friends. And also to reach out and find a community of people that I was connected to, and that resonated with what I was saying. And that grew. I did that for about 4 years, but I'd been back in New Zealand for a holiday in 2019 before the world changed. And I was sitting on the plane, and we just had a fantastic trip, but when the distance is so great, when you have 18,000 kilometers between your two countries, it's a very mixed bag of emotions when you're on that plane, knowing that you're about to leave the country again, and that it's likely going to be at least 2 years. How naive was I in 2019? I thought it was going to be another 2 years before I could come home. So as I was sitting there, I had the words "make it count" come into my head, and they just kept repeating it. So if I have to live so far away from my home country and everything that I know, and all the relationships that I've built up, then I need to make it count. I need to turn these challenges into my competitive advantage. And that was the starting point of the idea of writing the book. I had been doing a lot of writing, also building up my social media, following on Instagram as well, and through Facebook. And people were enjoying what I was writing, but very much aware that writing is here today, gone tomorrow. And I remember when my dad passed away, he was a builder, and somebody said to me, "Isn't it wonderful that you can walk around your hometown and see all these houses and buildings that he's built?" And that really stuck with me. Like, that is cool. That is fantastic. And then I thought about myself, and I thought, what am I leaving behind here? And with social media, you're not leaving much. So that all those thoughts came together and was the beginning of me having this very strong knowing that this book had to be written. And I started that, early 2019. The pandemic, in some ways, was an advantage. I think many books got written during the pandemic. That was maybe the upside. So I continued on that for a couple of years. I worked with an editor. That was part of my process too. It was important to me to publish the book to the very highest quality that I could and to reach as many people as possible. So part of that was surrounding me with the right people, the professionals around me. So yeah, it was probably 2 or 3 years. And, you know, it's funny because before I wrote it, of course, I Googled how to write a book. Well, how long does it take? And all the answers started to come back. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And I remember thinking, why is it taking these people so long? But having been through the process, I completely understand now. So yeah, it was about 3 years in the making. And then it came time to decide how I was going to publish. While I was writing it, I was very aware that I needed to have an audience with me once I finished that book. There's no point writing a book if you haven't found your audience. So that was part of my strategy with social media. I was lucky to have a video that went viral on Instagram that's been seen now by I think 2.4 million people,
Wow.
which is just crazy. And as I say, it was luck, because I spent hours writing my Instagram post, but it wasn't my writing that tipped it over. It was a short video about my daughter's first day at school, but that gave me a boost. So when I got to the end of it, I had, and I still have, a very connected and a good sized following on social media. But I wanted to explore traditional publishing. I felt like it was an itch that needed to be scratched. So I did. I began that process. I gave myself 6 months, which is not long, for the pitching process. The pitching process can take years. One of the hurdles I had was, I'm a New Zealand author, but living in Denmark. So when I was talking to New Zealand publishers, the hesitation was that I wasn't living there. I wasn't sitting there. So I couldn't potentially push out the book, promote it as much as what I would if I was living within the country. But then with Denmark, most of the publishing companies are focusing on books that are printed in Danish. And that's certainly on my wish list for my book to be translated into Danish. But in doing that, it potentially is losing a little bit of its quirks as well, because I use a lot of New Zealand slang through my book. I play with words a little bit, which don't always translate. So I kind of ignored the Danish publishing scene for a little bit, and I looked at the UK publishing scene, and I had a couple of conversations there with an agent there who was interested in it. But again, his hesitation was that it was, the two countries mentioned, Denmark and New Zealand, and he's sitting up there in the UK. And, the other thought that went through my head is that I've spent this time building up my following, connecting with like-minded people. And if I publish in one country, or choose a publishing, I'm going to make it harder for my global followers to be able to source the book. But anyway, I ended back up in Denmark, and I thought, well, okay, I'll give myself another couple of weeks here. I'll reach out. I had two companies come back to me, two publishing companies. And actually, I did sign a contract with a Danish company. And almost immediately after I had done that, I started to get nervous. I think for me, my story, it's personal. It's my story. And I was handing over control of that to somebody else who was going to decide how it looked, when it was going to come out. And then also I had many of my followers write to me and say, but how will I buy it? And it wasn't easy for me to be able to supply them in the early stages of when the book came out. So I actually cancelled that contract. I backed out of it. Thankfully, I was able to be released from it. And I published the book myself, both in New Zealand and Denmark. And a key part of my strategy was to make sure that I could secure a book distributor, which meant that people in both countries can go into any high street bookshop or your local bookshop and be able to get the book. So it was a long process, but I believe I've made the right decision for this book. And let's see what happens with the next one.
Yeah. And I'm wondering what sort of feedback you've received from people, especially like your friends and that in Denmark.
Yeah, so the book has been really well received here in Denmark, particularly with the international community. I think for many people who are similar to myself, who have, particularly in a two-culture relationship, by reading my book, they feel somewhat validated that they weren't the only one going through this stuff, because there is pressure when you arrive to integrate. Integration is a very big theme in Denmark, and there's this expectation that you will embrace everything and you'll have a smile on your face every day. And the reality is not that. The reality is hard. You spend many months at language school. mean, I remember a week here waking up on Monday and just thinking, how am I going to fill in this week? I mean, I don't even know anyone to go knock on their door and have a cup of tea. Not that it works like that in Denmark, but it is tough. So it's been, you know, and I receive emails every week from readers who've just finished the book, letting me know that they've enjoyed it, and definitely the feedback from people, other internationals who have lived in Denmark, is thank you for writing this book. It's a viewpoint that hasn't been told before, and it's nice to know I'm not alone. The feedback from readers in New Zealand has also been extremely positive, but perhaps with a slightly different theme of, I guess it's more entertainment for readers in other countries, and particularly New Zealand, listening to a story of a New Zealander living in another country too. And just understanding that viewpoint too. I think sometimes, and maybe it's a special quirk of New Zealand, sometimes when you hear that one of your fellow countrymen's living overseas, you can fall into this trap of thinking everything's bright and rosy again. But as we know, it's not. I mean, that's life. You have your good days and your hard days. So yeah, the feedback has been great, and I'm just so happy that you know, so many people have resonated with the stories that I've shared.
And I've got a few people watching, so just reminding people watching, if you've got any questions for Keri, please type them in comments and I can read them out. Kim's got a question for you. She says, what was the most challenging part of writing the book?
I think all the parts are quite challenging, actually. But I clearly remember at the beginning of the process knowing that there's this story inside me, and how can I get that onto paper? You know, you have 100 different ideas and themes, and you want to create the reader journey as well. You know, you can't write a book that says day one, I woke up and did this, day two, I did that. You have to inject a bit of personality. I have to put my own voice into it too. So I remember that definitely being a overwhelming thought right at the beginning of the process. But yeah, I think it's the discipline really of just every day writing something. And I was doing my writing mainly in the evenings for this book. I was working full time. My daughter was at an age where she was going to bed around 7 o'clock, 7:30. So that gave me between 7 and 10 or 11 to write. So yeah, I think, not procrastinating. I would say procrastination and the perfection can be the two biggest enemies of an author. So procrastinating and getting distracted down rabbit holes and not getting the words on paper, but also perfection too, because, you know, you're sitting at your computer and you have this idea of you want the perfect paragraph to flow off the keyboard. But I'm all about the, can we call it the shitty first draft? So getting something down and then making it better and better and better through rewrites and rereads as well.
So are you working on anything new at the moment?
I am. I've got a couple of projects on the go. So one is I am currently recording the audiobook for Nothing Like a Day.
Yep.
So we're doing that one. And I'm also working on the sequel to Nothing Like a Dane, which will be called Nothing Like a Kiwi. And for those who don't know, New Zealanders often refer to themselves as Kiwis, being after the national bird of New Zealand. So the next book in the series is about what happens when you're kind of 5 years into your new country and you realize that you're not the same person that you were 5 years ago when you left New Zealand. But I'm still not Danish, so where does that put me? So it'll be written against the backdrop of the pandemic as well, because my 5 years was over that period, and that's something that I knew would be a theme in this book. But actually, the more that I map it out, I can see it's it's probably going to be one of the bigger themes in the book. I don't know. Let's see.
And have you had a chance to go back to New Zealand recently, or?
I was fortunate to be able to go back in April last year, which is when the book was released in New Zealand. So April 2022, and we had 4 wonderful weeks there. Very, very grateful to be back there, and I hope we're not in a situation again where we can't travel back to our country, as was the case then.
And did you find when you were there, you were doing things you normally wouldn't have, and maybe people were looking at you strangely in New Zealand?
Well, actually, we were in a supermarket, and I was in the supermarket with my daughter, who was 6 years old, and she said to me, she said, "Mummy, why are people not wearing shoes?" Which you might understand, but yeah, there's this thing that happens in New Zealand. People aren't always wearing shoes, which is one of the difficult things to explain to people not from New Zealand, why that happens and why that works. But essentially, particularly if it's in summer, it can just be a bit hard to put your shoes on, I think. So people just pop down the shops barefoot, which definitely does not happen here in Copenhagen. So it was great seeing New Zealand through her eyes, actually, and me having to explain that. And I would say the other thing is the way that in New Zealand, everyone talks to anyone. You know, we're very good at talking to strangers. That's how I met my Dane. But it's something that I haven't done in a long time. So when you come off that plane at Auckland International Airport, you're immediately, well, my senses are immediately overwhelmed with people smiling at you, giving you eye contact, having these small conversations, and also, of course, the familiar accents, which is always super nice to hear. But yeah, and not having had small talk for quite a while, which is partly Danish culture, but also because I'm restricted in communicating in Danish in Denmark. It was nice, but also like there was a moment there I was thinking, what does she want? Why does she keep talking to me? Does she want money? Like, yeah. So that was funny.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I was recently reading something, I think the person was from the UK even, and she was in Australia and said how tiring it was. Everyone who like would say hi or smile, and she'd have to respond to everyone walking past her.
Yeah,
and you really just sort of yeah.
And that's the flip side. And I must say, I was talking to a friend here, and she said to me, she's also a New Zealander living here in Copenhagen, and she said to me, "Oh, we were going up the stairs to the apartment and the neighbor was there, and I just didn't have the energy to talk to them. And then I realized I'm in Denmark, and that's completely okay to walk past your neighbor and not talk." So yeah, there's definitely advantages of that as well.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, I mean, if you come into a culture and you don't understand the inner dynamics, I guess it can come across as being quite rude. But typically it's, yeah, people respecting each other's space.
And Kim's got a good question. She says, are there any Danish customs that you've come to enjoy?
Well, the pastries, that's a given.
Yeah.
You know, at Christmas time, there's some traditions I don't enjoy that much, which are, again, super lovely, but I've just not been brought up with it, which is dancing around the Christmas tree.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it, yeah. We used to get videos of seeing people dance around the Christmas trees.
Yeah. And it is super, as the locals would say, hyggeligt. It's very cozy and it's very lovely, and it's wonderful values, and, you know, how lovely to be so connected with your family. You want to hold their hands and sing around the tree. But, you know, definitely growing up in New Zealand, we're not doing that. And it's a bit like me standing at the swimming hall without any clothes on. I'm just not comfortable in that situation. So that's one that maybe I don't bond with so much. But, you know, ask me again in 5 years, maybe I'll be a pro. But there are some other Christmas traditions, which I really enjoy, which is they have a dessert here called, well, the Danes listening will probably, if there's any Danes watching, please cover your ears now. But there's a Danish dessert called risalamande, and that is basically a creamed rice kind of dessert with almonds in it, but there's only one whole almond, and that's what you have to find on Christmas Day. So the person that finds that gets a present. So there's much competition. You know, you'll always have the uncle or the father pretending they don't have it in their mouth or having it in their mouth, and you know, you'll have kids with sad faces because they haven't found it, and yeah, all the tricks come out there. So I think that's a really lovely one.
And Kelly, she wonders what your favourite book is at the moment, if there's something you might have read that you want to recommend to us.
Yeah. One of the recent ones I read was, and it's a New Zealand author, of course, Before You Knew My Name by Jacqueline Biblitz.
Okay, yes, I've read that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic book. My to-be-read list is probably bigger than my read list in the last year, unfortunately. It's most of my free time's gone into writing, but the books that I want to get into this year are the Seven Sisters series that everyone's talking about.
That's a good one.
And also The Seven Husbands by Evelyn Hugo. So these ones are on my list, but I would welcome and love anybody else giving me book recommendations, actually.
Yeah, I think, we have lots and lots. And lots of New Zealand and Australian authors as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, there's a lot of us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much for talking with me. It's been great to chat to you. And like I said, really enjoying your book and looking forward to finishing it. And great to hear you're writing another one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you learn lots more about Denmark in the second half of the book.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks for those who joined in with questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.